Why intelligent people reject social life. Before we dive into the depths of Schopenhauer's mind, let me ask you something. Have you ever stood in the middle of a conversation and suddenly felt like you were watching it from the outside? Like a spectator at a play you didn't audition for? Not because the people around you weren't kind or interesting, but because somewhere deep within you whispered, "This isn't the real thing." That strange sense of emotional distance, that quiet longing for something truer. That's where our journey begins today. Because if you've ever felt like social life is a performance, if you've ever walked away from a crowded room to be alone, not out of disdain, but out of necessity, then you're already touching the edges of one of the most provocative philosophical ideas of all time. And no thinker embraced this more starkly than Arthur Schopenhauer. Often dubbed the philosopher of pessimism, Schopenhauer wasn't just tolerating solitude, he celebrated it. For him, the rejection of social life wasn't a character flaw. It was a sign of inner evolution. The intelligent individual doesn't escape from others because they can't connect. They walk away because they've glimpsed something more profound. Schopenhauer believed that the more intelligent a person is, the less they need the social world to feel complete. It wasn't arrogance, it was clarity. He argued that most social interaction is, at best, a distraction, at worst, a form of self-betrayal. Why? Because much of what we call social life is built on ritual, pretense, and performance. Polite conversation, witty banter, strategic charm. It often exists to maintain an image, not to explore truth. And when your mind starts craving truth over appearance, depth over display, solitude begins to feel like home. To the intelligent mind, social life can start to resemble a carefully rehearsed dance. Everyone knows the steps. Everyone plays their role. But where's the authenticity? Schopenhauer wrote, "Ordinary people are like a clock that must be wound up daily. The intelligent are like a watch that runs on its own." In other words, the intelligent person doesn't rely on external stimulation to feel alive. They generate meaning from within, and that makes them deeply, often uncomfortably, independent. But solitude doesn't come without a cost. Schopenhauer was blunt about this. The more deeply you understand life, the more deeply you suffer. And not because life becomes worse, but because illusion becomes impossible. You begin to see the impermanence of everything: joy, love, success, even life itself. You see the constant striving that underlies human behavior, the endless wanting, the hunger that never quite goes away. Schopenhauer called this force the will, an irrational blind drive that compels all living things to desire, to chase, to struggle. And here's the tragic part. The will can never be satisfied. The moment we fulfill one desire, another takes its place. This is the rhythm of existence. Moments of pleasure, surrounded by oceans of longing. Most people live within this cycle without ever naming it. But the intelligent person begins to see the pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That clarity can feel like a burden, but it's also the beginning of liberation. Here's what Schopenhauer understood so profoundly. Being alone doesn't mean being lonely. In fact, he believed that the intelligent person is most themselves when alone, because only in solitude do we begin to peel away the layers. Only in solitude does the inner voice emerge without being drowned out by society's noise. And most people fear that voice. That's why they avoid solitude. They fear facing the unfiltered content of their own mind, the fears, the regrets, the unanswered questions. But for those willing to listen, that inner dialogue becomes sacred. Solitude, then, is not a punishment. It is a privilege, a protected space where the self can breathe, reflect, and regenerate. Schopenhauer believed that the world tries relentlessly to shape us. The crowd teaches us what to desire, what to value, how to speak, how to live. And the more we conform, the more we lose the essence of who we are. Detachment, in this view, isn't giving up. It's waking up. It's the realization that you don't have to play by the crowd's rules. You don't have to chase things just because others do. You don't have to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. True detachment is radical because it says, I define myself, not by applause, not by wealth, not by reputation, but by integrity, depth, and inner coherence. And that kind of freedom terrifies people who depend on external validation to feel real. In a world addicted to stimulation, stillness becomes revolutionary. The intelligent person doesn't reject the world because they hate it. They step back because they want to see it clearly. And often, that clarity doesn't come in conversation or conflict. It comes in silence, in reflection, in watching the world without needing to control it. Schopenhauer saw wisdom as a quiet force. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It deepens. It sharpens. It refines. And it usually arises far from the crowd. This is why many of history's greatest thinkers, artists, and mystics have sought solitude. Not to escape life, but to enter it more fully. To find the music that only plays when the noise stops. Here's the hard truth Schopenhauer offers us. Suffering isn't a flaw in the human condition. It is the human condition. But that doesn't mean it's meaningless. To suffer with awareness is to begin the journey toward wisdom. Because when you finally stop running from pain, you start to learn from it. And in that learning, something remarkable happens. The ego softens, the noise fades, and the soul begins to speak. What if your discomfort isn't a sign of weakness, but a sign of awakening? What if your dissatisfaction with shallow conversation, superficial connection, endless distraction? What if that's not something to fix, but something to honor? Maybe it means you're evolving. Maybe it means you're ready to stop pretending. Solitude is not exile. It's preparation. The intelligent person may withdraw from the world, but only to return stronger, more grounded, more awake. Because once you've learned to sit in silence without fear, once you've faced the truths most people spend their lives avoiding, you bring something rare back into the world. Presence. Not performance, not persuasion, just presence. The ability to be real in a world obsessed with illusion. Schopenhauer would say that this kind of individual is no longer a product of the world. They are a creator within it, not chasing meaning, but embodying it. So I'll leave you with a question. When was the last time you were truly alone? Not scrolling, not distracting, not performing, just you, the silence, and the truth of your own thoughts. And what did you find there? Because the most profound transformation doesn't begin in the crowd. It begins in a quiet room where you finally hear yourself clearly and choose not to look away.